It's the show the establishment warned you about.
Welcome back. It's the Dr. Tommy Show, coming to you live from the free state of Florida, from Echelon-Health Studios. We're glad you're here. Streaming on Rumble, and then goes to YouTube, and it's also available on any of the audio podcasts that you want to subscribe to. We're having a little bit of difficulty, it looks like, with iHeart and Apple and Amazon. I don't know who listens to them on those. I don't know. I don't know who listens to what, but Spotify, it works perfect. YouTube also has a podcast audio feed that they do, and that works perfect. So who knows? I sent something to SoundCloud, who houses our podcast, and we'll see, whatever. Anyway, I wanted to talk about something. Last time I was talking about the Tuskegee study, and I wanted to make a point about it today that I didn't make last time. So Tuskegee study was a study that was done on these people who had syphilis, and it was known that they had syphilis. And what they did was the government came out and they said, we're going to do an untreated study on syphilis to see what the natural history was. And then the take home for the participants was, we're going to give you some free medical checks. We're going to draw blood. We're going to monitor you. And so in theory, these people would think, well, certainly some care is better than no care. These were poor Black Americans. And so the thought is that this is what was going to happen. Well, what happened was, along the way, unbeknownst to the participants, treatment for syphilis became known. And when that became known, well, the government said, let's just go ahead and not treat these people. We've not treated them for so long, or they haven't been treated for so long. Let's see what happens if they still don't get treated. And so over the time period that happened, of course, people continued to have syphilis. Syphilis advances and then eventually becomes terminal in neurosyphilis, typically. And so anyway, syphilis went throughout this community, and people died, and then children were born with congenital syphilis. It was a terrible thing. Well, it's interesting because when I was reading about this, one of the most critical articles about this study, this untreated syphilis study, came from none other than Planned Parenthood. So Planned Parenthood, as we all know, is highly active politically, and politically active on the left. And so here they are. They have this very critical piece about the government. And so it says, the highly unethical syphilis experiment. This is from PlannedParenthood.org blog. What is the Tuskegee study? It says the highly unethical syphilis experiment was conducted by the U.S. Public Health Service and the Tuskegee Institute in Alabama. And it says that the Tuskegee study of untreated syphilis in the Negro male was launched to observe the symptoms of syphilis. The sexually transmitted infection was incurable at the time, and because of white supremacist thinking, it was falsely thought to have different effects on the black bodies than white bodies. That's what the Planned Parenthood's take on it was. And then it says down here later on, it said in 1947, penicillin became widely available as a treatment for syphilis, but was never offered to the men at any point during the remaining 25 years of the study. Because of their race, the men in the study were viewed and treated as less than human. They were used as research subjects, much like rats, whose sole purpose was to reveal the long-term effects of this potentially deadly disease. Now, that's a lot of supposition there, that this was only done for reasons having to do with race. The treatment for it was, like they said, penicillin. So what we would say is that if the treatment is penicillin, then if these were white people, according to Planned Parenthood, they would have been treated. But reading on, we see that going down there, it says that the estimate 100 study participants died of late-stage tertiary syphilis, while still others passed away from conditions in which untreated STI was a complicating factor. Last known survivor. Anyway, all the way down at the bottom, they say, to this day, black people's experience, black capitalized, and pain are too often dismissed or ignored by doctors and other healthcare providers, which alongside the historical dehumanization of black people contributes to So this whole thing attributes all of this to racism. And so what we miss out here is that this was actually done by the government. This was not done by the Ku Klux Klan. This was not done by Catholic Charities. This was not done by even local governments. This was done by the federal government, and the federal government is the one that did not treat these people. And I think the idea that this was done just because these people were black misses the point. The point is that this was done by the government, and that leads us to today. So today we have this story that the Florida has ended vaccine mandates. So Florida has ended vaccine mandates, and so what they're saying is basically childhood immunizations are now optional for school. It used to be that school, you had to have measles, mumps, rubella, you had to have polio, and it was also recommended that you get hepatitis B, chickenpox, and others. Well, now the Surgeon General in Florida with the Department of Health has ruled that there is not going to be any need for vaccine mandates, and that you will be able to decide for yourself if you want it. And if you do, then you can get it. And if not, you don't have to. And then, of course, the AMA has come out. This was predictable, and said, AMA statement on Florida ending all vaccine mandates. This is from their website. It says the following statement is attributable to Dr. Sandra Freihofer. The American Medical Association strongly opposes Florida's plan to end all vaccine mandates, including those required for school attendance. This unprecedented rollback would undermine decades of public health progress and place children and communities at risk for diseases such as measles, mumps, polio, and chickenpox, resulting in serious illness, disability, and even death. Now, no one has made this illegal. Mind you, this is making it to where it is legal for you to decide if you want to have this done for your child. While there is still time, we urge Florida to reconsider this change to help prevent a rise in infectious disease outbreaks that put health and lives at risk. So Sandra Freihofer has determined that this freedom of choice now, your body, your choice, is now going to cause increased risk of measles, mumps, and rubella, and chickenpox, and also polio. So, but why is this happening? Why is this happening? When I was a kid, people got vaccines. Most everybody got vaccines, and there was never any thought of it. There was never any pushback, not that I remember. But what happened was more and more people started to question whether or not you needed to have all of these vaccines. And there were such things as chickenpox parties. And I remember this was brought up during COVID, and people acted like you were just as backward as the most backward Russian peasant in the 1800s if you thought that a chickenpox party was a good idea. And whether or not you think it is a good idea, it was something that happened in the 70s, and it was something that kids would get together if they had chickenpox, and they said, well, might as well get it over with. Better to get it now. And they would expose each other and this, that, and the other, and away you go. So you have chickenpox as a child. You develop a rash, you get over it, and then away you go. Well, that was talked about during COVID, saying, look, we can just, instead of locking everybody down and hiding away, why don't we just, if you happen to get COVID, then you get natural immunity, and then on your way. Oh, and that was also the other thing, was a natural immunity was, again, that was backward thinking. There was no such thing as natural immunity. The only immunity you could get was that generated by the modified RNA injection that you took, which programmed your cells to make spike proteins, cells in your deltoid, cells in your heart, cells in your ovaries, cells everywhere, making spike proteins. And so here we have the fast forward now, and then Florida is ending these vaccine mandates because people are saying, we don't trust the government to tell us what to do with our own bodies, and we want to have the ability to choose whether or not to do that. And this has been met with the predictable pushback from the medical establishment. And I would assume that the pharmaceutical industry is probably in panic mode, and the Tallahassee lobby offices of the pharmaceutical companies are probably pretty busy today. Because what's going to happen is, if you look, I did a AI search because that's the most absolutely foolproof way of getting complete knowledge is a AI Google search. Anyway, it says here, It says targeted mandates. The plan would phase out decades-old requirements for children to be vaccinated against diseases such as polio, measles, mumps, and chickenpox before attending daycare or school. And it says it's a multi-step process. It says the Florida Department of Health is set to immediately repeal mandates for certain vaccines, including those for chickenpox, hepatitis B, and others that were put into place via departmental rules rather than state law. So here we are again. This is one of the reasons that people are getting. This is one of the reasons why it's come to this, because. So it starts off where you have, like I said, measles, mumps, rubella, polio. Okay, so no one wants to have polio. That's pretty much a given. Measles is pretty terrible. And mumps can cause sterility and all these things. So these are, like I said, tried and true vaccines. But then what they started doing was they said, well, let's try this. So hepatitis B is given to children. Hepatitis B is a disease that you can get from blood. Well, when your child is born in the hospital, they get their first dose of hepatitis B. And then 6 weeks later, they get another dose. And then 6 months later, they get the final dose of hepatitis B vaccine. And the reason for that, according to the experts, is, well, then later on in life, they won't have to worry about getting hepatitis B, which is a very bad thing. Well, guess what? Hepatitis B, if you get it early in life, vaccine, the chances of it being available to you by the time you possibly get exposed to it, whether it be through an IV drug use or a blood transfusion or however else people get hepatitis B, your immunity will likely have waned and been gone. The reason I know this is because when I was a younger person, I had to get vaccinated for hepatitis B. That's probably in 2001. And actually, that was before medical school. So that was in 2001. And then by the time I went to residency, my immunity was already not there and I had to get a booster. So residency happened in 2006, so 5 years. So if children are getting vaccinated against hepatitis B in infancy, by the time they're 6, potentially, they're not going to have immunity if they track along the way I tracked. So what's the point of it? So, and then chickenpox, like we talked about, was something that people got exposed to in a social environments on purpose. So these vaccines got introduced and parents were like, well, we don't want these. And so that's the type of thing the government did this to itself. And this is another thing about the government here. It says, broadening exemptions. The state health department will also expand its exemption policy to allow parents to opt their children out of required vaccines based on personally held beliefs. Well, that's obviously bad news. We can't have people, especially if these are religious beliefs. I mean, my gosh, is there anything more backward in America today than a religious belief that will say that you should not have government mandated treatment for something if you have a religious belief? This is a funny story. I can tell it now. Back when I was earlier, several years ago, 3 years ago now, I used to work part-time. I was, did this, we do our practice here. And then whenever you start a practice like that, unless you're independently wealthy or whatever the case is, you have to start off doing something else. Because when we started this practice, there were 0 patients and the revenue was 0. And so we don't take insurance. So there's no line of patients, here, oh, I've been assigned to you. You're a concierge doctor. You have to go out and basically attract patients, just like any other business. And over time, you can get enough patients to support yourself. Well, anyway, there was 2 years ago, I think it was now, coming up on 2 years, I still worked in urgent care. And I worked in local urgent care here in Tampa. And the COVID vaccine mandates were coming around. And then guess what? They said, if you don't get your COVID vaccine, you're going to be fired. And this was common. This is happening all over the place. This was during the reign of the auto pen. And when auto pen was in office, there was vaccine mandates. And so I was mandated to get a COVID vaccine by my employer or face termination. Well, luckily for me, I did not get the COVID vaccine because I didn't want it. But I did say I had a religious exemption. And the reason I said it was a religious exemption was because I said it was something to do with abortion. And basically, it was a product. One of the vaccines had its basis in abortion research, and I didn't want it because of that. Well, that was deemed to be inadequate by my employer. However, my employer was also a conglomerate, just like every other healthcare company. It was a big, giant company, and it had other tentacles. And there was a couple of our friends who were employed by this corporation, and they worked in different departments or different companies, part of this corporation. They used my vaccine letter that I wrote, great letter, and it was approved for them for their religious beliefs. So I didn't get approved by one aspect of this corporation, but two other people used my religious exemption and got approved. So anyway, all that's to say is that whenever you have things like the Tuskegee study, where you infect people, in this case black men, black people, for the purpose of just studying them to see what happens, that's evil. And that's something that the governments do. Like I said, Planned Parenthood blamed it on racism. And there may have been some racism then. But the reason for it, though, was not because of racism. The Ku Klux Klan did not organize this. The government organized this. The United States government organized this. And as we saw yesterday or last time, the CDC gave out a little limp-wristed apology about it and said, well, things were done, as they say, things happened. And what does it say here? The CDC's take on it was, let's see here. It says they did not, this is from the CDC's website. As part of the study, researchers did not collect informed consent. Okay, so that was the big problem for the CDC. No informed consent. They also did not offer treatment, even after it was easily available. Well, they failed to mention that the congenital syphilis that the Planned Parenthood article mentioned, or the deaths and all this, that, and the other. They don't even say anything about death on this website, I don't think. So, they whitewash it as typical. But anyway, the government is the reason. And there's the old Otto Penn himself right there. He must have been the one to say something. Otto Penn Biden. Tuskegee study is the first and not last of, maybe not the first, is an early example of what happens when the government gets involved in doing things on the health level that are for your good, and you should not necessarily believe them. And then when somebody like Joseph Ladapo comes around and he's saying, I'm going to end mandates, and Governor DeSantis, oh gosh, they're the boogeyman. They're the bad people. What's going to happen now? Are all pediatric patients going to stop getting vaccines? Probably not. I mean, there might be some. There's probably going to be an increase in the number that are not. There may even be an increase in measles. It is yet to be seen if there will be an increase in polio. Or I don't know if there will be an increase in polio, because polio has almost been eradicated, which they have attributed to the vaccine. Which may or may not be completely true. I did see some studies that were showing the decrease in infectious disease in relation to vaccines and in relation to improved public health. And the thought there was that the improved public health also, or had more of a part to do with it. Now, this is not medical advice. You have to. This is what's the important thing is. This is not medical advice that I'm giving. This is social commentary, whatever the case is. But this is saying what is the proper role of government, and what is the proper role of a doctor, and what is the proper role of a patient. And is the proper role of the government to make a guideline where doctors follow blindly and say that you have to have this done? Or is the role of government, like the CDC, to collect information, make recommendations, and then let doctors talk with patients and let patients decide? Is that the role? You decide for yourself. You can basically draw the line between, is the state autonomous person, is the state the ultimate sovereign over an individual, or is the individual sovereign over him's own self. So anyway, that's a little bit about Tuskegee study, a little bit more I wanted to talk about, and then it ties in today with the vaccine mandates. Marco Rubio, as the kids call him, is say today is based. I think that's what the terminology is. Based means basically like you don't give a crap about what other people say. And Marco Rubio has been doing things on the level, on the national level now, which are viewed as being good by conservatives, including myself. And so Marco Rubio, here's a little thing from Marco Rubio yesterday. This is from Fox News via the Gateway Pundit, which you can also access on our podcast website, all these shows websites. But anyway, this is Marco Rubio.
For many, many years, established intelligence that allow us to interdict and stop drug boats. And we did that. And it doesn't work. Interdiction doesn't work because these drug cartels, what they do is they know they're going to lose, 2% of their cargo. They bake it into their economics. What will stop them is when you blow them up, when you get rid of them. The President of the United States is going to wage war on narco-terrorist organizations. This one was operating in international waters, headed towards the United States to flood our country with poison, and under President Trump, those days are over. The United States has long, for many, many years, established intelligence that allow us to interdict and stop drug boats. And we did that. And it doesn't work. Interdiction doesn't work because these drug cartels, what they do is they know they're going to lose, 2% of their cargo. They bake it into their economics. What will stop them is when you blow them up.
I played that again so that you could hear it. Audio wasn't up. Anyway, that's based Marco Rubio. And Marco Rubio is really putting himself out there. I think it'll be kind of interesting to see what happens between him and Vance as far as the presidential sweepstakes are concerned, because Marco is obviously interested in being president. He ran for president before. That's how he got the moniker Little Marco from Trump. And anyway, so Trump and Marco are now buddies. Marco's probably the most, like I said, he's based. He's going to be in the talks to be the president. Mike LaChance on Gateway Pundit says, a new and improved Marco Rubio continues to impress. He has turned out to be one of Trump's best cabinet picks. I agree with that. And we'll see. I like Vance. I like Marco Rubio now. Marco Rubio before, when Senator McCain was alive, was part of the Gang of Eight, if you remember that. That was back in 2008 for y'all keeping score at home. Or 2010, I believe, 2010. And that was during the, what is it called? The Tea Party. And he was part of the Tea Party. So he got in there on the Tea Party. He got in there on Tea Party time. Ted Cruz got there during the Tea Party time. Rand Paul got there during the Tea Party time. So Marco was Tea Party candidate. Actually, Mark Levin takes credit, and I believe it's true, with putting Marco in office by endorsing him when he was unknown. And Marco was running against somebody. Who was it? Marco was running against, who was it? Oh, Charlie Crist. Marco was running against Charlie Crist, who was the epitome of an establishment Republican back in the day. And he was running against the governor at the time, Charlie Crist, who was the, like I said, Republican establishment candidate of choice for the Senate. And it turned out that Marco was endorsed by Mark Levin, and then Marco shot up the polls. Similar to how Ron DeSantis was also virtually unknown. I didn't even know about Ron DeSantis. I did not know about Governor DeSantis when he ran for governor. He was running against another Republican. You could call him an establishment Republican. And he was able to shoot up the polls, or rocket up the polls, as Trump called it, when Trump endorsed him. So endorsements do matter, but Marco Rubio is doing good. I think I think he would be a good candidate. I think he would. He has the what's that called? He has the thick skin that it takes, I think, to survive. He's the anti-Romney. Romney of hot dog eating fame. Whose favorite meat is hot dog. Mitt Romney, who was destroyed easily by being accused of putting his dog on the roof of his car and keeping women in binders and causing his employee's wife to have cancer. Mitt Romney was easily destroyed like a wet paper bag against Sonny Liston. And Marco Rubio is made of harder stuff now. And Marco Rubio seems to have his head on his shoulders now. And I don't think this is a ploy. I think this is I think this is growth. I think this is a sign of growth. This is a sign of finding one's bearings. This is a sign of maturity. And, we'll see. I know there's probably people out there say, oh, Marco Rubio's a rhino. There's all these, everybody's entitled to their opinion. And I'm entitled to mine. And I think he's doing well. I think Vance is doing well, too. And there's also people who say Vance is a pansy because he called out Trump before, whatever. And there's people that say Trump's not good enough. There's always people that are going to complain. Get your own podcast and you could do whatever you want. Anyway, I saw this today. Don Serber has a Substack. So Don Serber has a Substack and it's called, it's called Don Serber, DonSurber.substack.com. Okay, so he has a thing today called about being fired. And he talks about how he was fired from all these different jobs. Well, being fired turned out to be very good for him professionally because he found his footing wherever he needed to be, and that was writing for himself. And he ended up writing a blog and doing well with Google Ads, but now he's not doing as well with Google Ads because of conservative, what do you call it? Well, we'll just say that Google is censoring him. Okay. It says, he actually writes that in his article here. It says, in the past year, Google has begun canceling ads to post, and Blogger has deleted a few posts. So Blogger is owned by Google. That's where he writes his blog. So I'm moving on to Substack. I will not only survive, but thrive. That's what I do. I am posting here what Google censors there. Browse through the censored ones. The excuse is unreliable and harmful claims. The two most recently flagged were posts based on reporting by the Washington Post and New York Times. Anyway, so he writes about being fired, though. I've never been fired. I've quit a few jobs, but I've never been fired. But I always heard that people who were fired, it seems like it was almost a necessity to be fired before becoming very good at what you do. So Rush Limbaugh used to talk about being fired, and he said he was fired. I was trying to find a video about it earlier today. I couldn't find one. But he said he has been fired 7 or 8 times, I remember him saying. And it was always the same thing. You're not going to make it in this business. You need to find another business and blah, 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 blah. And so I've never been fired, but I have quit jobs. And that's to me is better. There's nothing better than telling someone to go pound sand. And now I'm at the point in my life, God willing, that I will never be fired because I work for myself. And so I can only be fired if I fire myself, or if I do like, what's his name did, James O'Keefe, and then I hire a board who can then fire me. I'm not going to do that. But anyway, I can be fired. I cannot be fired. And I'm going to fire myself. I'm not going to fire myself. But anyway, being fired, though, can be helpful. And people need to... Sometimes I run into people, patients, colleagues, whatever. Anyway, they start talking about things, and I said, you just don't put up with it, And they say, well, you can't do that. You gotta put up with some of it. So if you want to, you can. You don't have to. You don't have to put up with it. The bull crap. If your boss is giving you flack, find a new job. You don't have to work for yourself, but find a new job. Tell them to pound sand. It feels so good. I worked for, when I got out of college, medical school, I worked in a multi-specialty group. And the family doctors in multi-specialty groups are always, they're the bottom of the barrel in terms of pay. They're bottom of the barrel in terms of pay. They're the bottom of the barrel in terms of respect in a big specialty group. Usually, I'm not going to cast aspersions on anyone. If you're out there and you run a specialty group, you're like, hey, we don't do that. Okay, fine. I'm just saying in my experience, whenever I've worked for multi-specialty groups, so orthopedics, GI, internal medicine, family medicine, pediatric, blah, 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 you're right next to the pediatricians in terms of respect and pay. They think you're expendable, and the smartest people are the dermatologist and the radiologist, and they happen to get paid the most or whoever. And so anyway, when you work in these multi-specialty groups, the family doctors are often just taken for granted. And I remember I was working for this multi-specialty group, and they said, and I had already wanted to start Echelon Health at that point, and I had planned on working. I wanted to save up more money. I wanted one more year, and I said I'm gonna stay one more year. But my contract was up, and I remember the chair at the time. She said, "You know what?" I said, "Well, my contract's coming up, and I haven't heard anything from the bosses, and I want to know what's going on." And she says, "Well, they have met, and they were interested in keeping you. And if you take a 15% pay cut," and everyone else has done it. I later found out that wasn't true. There was one person who didn't do it, but everyone else besides her had done it. And the reason it wasn't true is because she was making money and they couldn't cut her pay, making money for the department. Anyway, so I said, you know what? She said, well, so think about it and let us know. And it was like July then maybe. And my contract, I think, was up in September. So a couple months. She had 60 days. I said, well, you can tell them now I got my answer. It's kind of like in The Godfather. I didn't even think about it now until just then. It's like, you can have my answer now, Senator, if you'd like. And he turns around and does that. And well, she kind of did that too. I said, well, you can have my answer now. And I said, you could tell him to go F himself. And she didn't, I don't know what she said. She just kind of looked and she goes, okay, I'll let him know. Anyway, that was my, that's one of the things that feels good. I like to do that. I like to tell, well, it's good to do that, to be able to do that. And getting fired may feel good later. Probably at the time it doesn't feel good. But the point is, being fired is not a bad thing necessarily, especially if you get fired for the right reasons. But back to my point, Walt Disney, I think, was told before that he was not going to be able to make it. There's numerous examples. People have told you're not going to make it. You're not cut out for this. Find something else to do. Screw them. Maybe they're right. Maybe you won't make it. But fail on your own. Don't let someone tell you can't do something. Don't let someone tell you can't do something. Look at Rosie O'Donnell. She's still going at it. Who am I to say that she's not a brilliant mind? I mean, maybe she'll make a comeback to The View, the Coven on The View. That would be nice. Anyway, so what else have we got here? Let's see, Ace of Spades. Florida's ending the vaccine mandates. We talked about that. AMA, we talked about that. Being fired, we talked about that. Marco Rubio. This is Dr. Tommy Show. Thank you for joining us. Rumble, streaming live, delayed on YouTube, streaming on anything that you want, but try Spotify. It seems to be the best. Thank you for joining us today. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.